May I ask you, Otto, in all sincerity, please listen to what I'm trying to say. Are you aware of the seriousness of the situation in which we find ourselves at this point in time, this day, March 21, 1985 in South Africa? Are you aware of the depth of feelings of bitterness and frustration of the millions of young black students and scholars? Are you aware of the feelings of the black workers? Are you aware of the feelings of many of the people of the rural community? And how much of that comes across and is understood, Otto? And if this is not understood, how do you see the possibility of a peaceful resolution of our country? To talk about exciting times when people are dying, when people have these deep feelings of anger and bitterness. Please, Otto, let us become more aware of the bitter reality which we have to face in our country. I'm pleading with you.
One can only visualize very tragic times ahead of us if the government is not prepared to dismantle apartheid. If the government still thinks the black man is going to wait by the side, wait for the white master to dismantle apartheid at his own pace, as much as the Afrikaner is prepared to fight to the last drop of blood, so does the black man today, to fight to the last drop of blood for his honor, for his liberation, for his pride.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Johannesburg, South Africa, Ted Koppel.
On March 18th, ABC News Nightline began an unprecedented series of broadcasts from South Africa, aimed at informing the American public of the issues facing this white-controlled African nation. It provided an opportunity to see and hear firsthand why South Africa's policies of racial segregation have brought about a growing international outcry for change.
On the surface, especially in its cities, South Africa looks much like any American city. English is almost universally spoken here, but the language of those who govern is Afrikaans. These men and women consider themselves Afrikaners whose roots are in this continent. In this, if in nothing else, today's rulers of South Africa consider themselves the same as blacks. In every other respect, however, the guiding principle here is separation of the races. The word for that policy in Afrikaans is Apartheid. No mixing of the races. Whites separate from blacks, separate from mixed races or colored. Since 1948, when Afrikaners wrested political control from those of English background, the rules and laws defining and describing apartheid in its minutest detail have been etched into a bureaucratic roadmap by which the Afrikaner government has sought to establish social order.
Apartheid is not something that leaps out at the newly arrived visitor to South Africa, and yet if you want a sense of how pervasive it is, consider this. South Africa's cities are white. Blacks may work in the cities, but they are required to live in all-black townships many miles outside the cities, and even there, permission is required. The lives of blacks are controlled by their passbooks, a form of internal passport which stipulates where they may live, where they may work. To be in the wrong place without the proper authorization is to risk arrest, fine, and/or imprisonment. In South Africa last year, a black person was arrested under the pass laws at the rate of 1 every 3 minutes.
Nearly all the law here is for the white people, and all the order is for the blacks. Naked power is the bulwark of white privilege here, and it's mobilized against the unarmed black populace without hesitation. A young boy learned that lesson while protesting at Crossroads, a squatter camp near Cape Town, where 18 black protesters have been killed over the last 2 months. Nationwide, more than 165 blacks were killed during unrest in 1984. Blacks can't vote, they can't own property. Neither may they decide where to live nor where they send their children to school. And many are not even permitted to live with their families. They may not choose whether and where to operate a business or hold a job. And blacks lack freedom of movement. Blacks literally are viewed as foreigners in South Africa. Each is assigned citizenship in one of 10 barren, overcrowded tribal reservations that either have been declared or are destined to become so-called independent nations.
There's nothing there. There's no food. There's no money. There's no work. But it's over 20 million people, they stay there. But there's no work, nothing there.
It's a crime for Africans to fail to carry internal passports, and if a black is traveling outside his assigned area, he has just 72 hours to get permission to stay or get out. Even people like Moses Ngobese, who has the proper pass to work as a bus driver in the city, still suffer under the system. He can't get a pass for his wife and 3 children, so he lives in a hostel for men only, and his family remains in the homeland.
900 kilometers from here to there.
Ngobese sees his family once a year.
We are talking about a country that says it is democratic. It is a country that excludes, in its most recent constitution, 73% of the people. I am a bishop in the Church of God. I'm a bishop of one of the most important dioceses in South Africa. I'm 53 years of age. You would, I suppose, say that I'm reasonably responsible. In my own country, I do not vote. According to this government, I am not a South African. My travel document says that of my nationality, that it is undeterminable at present, so that blacks are being turned into aliens in the land of their birth. Just last year, 160,000 blacks were arrested because they tried to sell their labor. And therefore, because they did not have the right pass, they were not allowed to sell their labor. Men are made to leave their homes, to live in single-sex hostels for 11 months of the year. This Christian country destroys black family life deliberately. This Christian country has destroyed stable black communities, uprooted 3.5 million blacks. And we are saying we seek to change the system. It's no use talking about selective morality. We, the victims of this vicious system, are saying, for goodness sake, when are you going to listen to the victim?
Mr. Krause, is the policy of apartheid justifiable on moral and religious grounds, do you think?
I think that one cannot look at these things solely in moral or religious lights.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking you whether it can be justified on those grounds.
I think it can very much be justified. It all depends on how you define apartheid, Ted. But the point is that what is necessary in this country, more than anything else, is growth. When everybody's poor, when people are poor, there's no chance of having social justice in the country. I mean, in no other country did one have instant social justice. And this is a matter of a country raising up all its people, uplifting them in the standard of life, economically, in their per capita income. And that's why I find South Africa such an exciting country, because we're doing this job.
The average yearly income for workers in South Africa, excluding domestic and agricultural servants, is $7,260 for whites, $3,516 for Asians, $2,508 for coloreds, and $1,860 for blacks.
One gets, Mr. Foreign Minister, an almost schizophrenic feeling here in South Africa sometimes about the subject of pressure from overseas. In one sense, one gets the feeling that South Africans are terribly sensitive to it, and then at times there is an almost we don't give a damn attitude. Which is it?
No, we do care.
It is an innocuous enough sounding word, disinvestment. But in South Africa, the prospect of having American companies pull their $14 billion worth of business and industry out of here because of apartheid, even the chance of that happening constitutes a real threat. Earlier, I spoke about disinvestment and labor unions and change with Harry Oppenheimer, whose financial empire includes a company which may be best known in the United States for its slogan, "Diamonds are forever." There is a Renoir statue discreetly tucked away at the foot of a large and elegantly landscaped garden. This is the Oppenheimer estate, which has been in the family for more than 60 years. The family has been in South Africa since shortly after the turn of the century. If you know anything of diamonds, you have heard of De Beers. It is the company which controls the world flow of diamonds. The Oppenheimer family controls De Beers.
Just give me a sense of what the scope of this company is.
Well, it's a company that's just think, it must be a company with assets of perhaps $5 billion. But it's the center of a very big group.
That's billion. A very big group indeed. Harry Oppenheimer, the patriarch of this family, is semi-retired now, but as he would modestly put it, he still retains some small influence over this financial empire based on diamonds, gold, copper, and coal.
Talk to me, if you will, Mr. Oppenheimer, for a moment about disinvestment. It's been suggested to me by some people in government that maybe it wouldn't make that much difference at all because what is not an American business would become an Italian business, a French business, a German business, that there are plenty of others who would come in here. Your reaction?
Well, there may be something in that, but I'm afraid I don't agree at all. I think the supporters of the government who say that sort of thing are just whistling to keep their courage up. I'm strongly against the disinvestment policy for quite different reasons. I think that it's something which, insofar as it had any effect on change, it could only have caused change by bringing about a state of despair amongst black people, which would lead not to peaceful change, but to violent change. If this country sinks, well, I shall have to go down with it. But I do not intend to drown because I jump overboard.
Last week, several thousand workers defied the government to demonstrate their support for SACTU, a labor organization driven underground for organizing the first nationwide general strike 25 years ago. The call to power led last fall to only the second national general strike, to protest the new Constitution's continued exclusion of the black majority from political participation. 500,000 workers joined, including these who were fired at a government synthetic fuels plant. But for striking workers, getting fired can be the least of their problems. 4 of 16 strike organizers arrested for treason are labor leaders, and the penalty for that can be execution. At least another 6 trade unionists have been arrested on lesser charges, and they could be jailed for 20 years. Chris Dlamini is one of them, and he foresees only more unrest.
It seems to us it's escalating by day, and it's going to be worse in the coming year or month.
The disruptions never seem to stop in Port Elizabeth, the site of a 3-day general strike this week. And because the giant American auto firms are based here, that places them on the cutting edge of union demands in South Africa.
What we're trying to say to the government, and I think the government comes to understand this, that you must change these harmful laws that you have, or you will harm your own economy to the point that you will have an economic disaster in the country.
It is one area where business leaders increasingly find themselves in agreement with the unions. What's brought American companies like General Motors into the forefront is a combination of union pressure and the Sullivan Principles, a voluntary code of conduct requiring U.S. firms to integrate facilities, train and upgrade black workers, and give equal pay for equal work.
While these companies try to create non-racial facilities within the plant itself, doesn't really change the basic structure of apartheid, because once people leave the company premises, they are subjected to the same sort of discrimination outside.
And it's apartheid outside the factory that has increasingly drawn the attention of the growing campaign in the U.S. for disinvestment, pulling out more than $6 billion in direct investment here.
If they withdrew money from South Africa and they're going to close factories and mines, there will be more jobless blacks than whites.
Mr. Ramaphosa?
It is true that if there is disinvestment, people would suffer. But the point is, black people in this country have suffered for well over 300 years. And the suffering that they will go through is not much more than what they are going through now. We've got massive unemployment in this country. We've got the oppression that is being perpetrated by the government. And that is suffering. And in the end, the very black people who are employed by those companies would take a decision that this is a sacrifice that we have to make.
Today, at a place called Uitenhage, another clash between blacks and police. At least 17 are dead. The number is expected to rise. There were no cameras present today when South African police opened fire on some 3,000 to 4,000 demonstrators. And by the time the camera crews arrived on the scene, the dead and wounded had been cleared away. But did the incident make an impact, even without the cameras there to record it? In Washington today, Secretary of State Schultz denounced South African policies as evil and unacceptable. Nightline correspondent Ken Walker flew to the scene of today's violence and spoke with eyewitnesses. A hippo, you should know, is an armored police van.
One of the hippos stay there. They cross the road. The time the people go up there, they start the police to shoot them. The other hippo stay there, this side. The other one stay that side. The other one cross the road. Then they are trying to shoot all the people. And the people is run. Another hippo was in back. The other hippo was in back. And the time they shoot him, all the people run away, far from the hippo.
It started as a funeral procession for 3 people shot and killed by police last week.
Even there, the police stay there and hit him. And hit him, the police, the time there. There's a blood, you can see it yourself. It's a blood of, over there, over 3, there's many blood even, yeah.
The procession started in the black township of Langa, just outside Port Elizabeth, the most volatile city in the country recently. The funerals were first set for last Sunday, but were banned by police, hoping to avoid a repeat of the massive political rallies funerals have become here. The funerals were reset for today, but banned again. A crowd of people who didn't get the word proceeded, and the police opened fire just before the crowd approached this neighboring white town called Uitenhage. Police say they were provoked by rock-throwing youths and officially list 17 dead and 36 injured. But at a local office of the Black Sash, an anti-apartheid women's group, eyewitnesses gave a different story.
I haven't seen the newspaper, but it seemed that the official report seems to bear very little relationship to what we have heard and been told and seen. I mean, there is one young man here with considerable shots in his back, and they were certainly not caused by a bird shot. There is a lot of unrest in the townships at the moment. The schools are boycotting. There's terrific basic unrest about all sorts of things like the rents, like the roads, like the schools. And really underlying all this is a tremendous dissatisfaction with the fact that they have no political rights. I mean, it really does boil down to that.
With just about all normal forms of political expression virtually cut off, seemingly ordinary events like funerals become highly charged political rallies. The black people near Port Elizabeth after today's events are bracing for many more of those.
Mrs. Mandela and I had just sat down to talk when we got news of the demonstrations and killings. For her, on this 25th anniversary of Sharpeville, it brought back a flood of memories.
This, of course, brings particular emotions to me. This is what our leaders went to prison for those 23 years ago. This confirms what we've been saying all along. There has been no change in this government. There have been no changes whatsoever. 25 years ago, officially 69 people were killed in Sharpeville. That pattern has continued throughout these years. There has been no change whatsoever.
I asked you before we began this interview. I told you that my expectations were that on the 25th anniversary of Sharpeville, something would happen. And you said, No, you had talked about it, you had thought about it, your colleagues had talked about it.
Yes, we had felt we should close that chapter where we simply provided cannon fodder for the apartheid regime. We love life no less. We have always felt that where possible we must avoid loss of life.
All right, but is it too late?
This country has enough wealth to look after all its inhabitants. Late as it is in the day, in the African National Congress, we still believe that we are prepared to accommodate each and everyone in this country. We cannot wish away even the racists who have violently governed us these past 30 years.
You seem to be saying that there is still the possibility for talk, for negotiation, for moving toward change in a peaceful way. Is that what you were saying?
We have always welcomed that, because that is precisely what we have been fighting for.
But now?
The fact that it has come too late in the day is now the South African white man's problem.
But then what does that mean, too late in the day? You're saying it's no longer possible? I can't believe that you're saying it's no longer possible to talk. It's always possible to talk.
We are not the people who closed that chapter of negotiation. The government itself closed that chapter of negotiation. Its answer to those pleas for negotiation was jailing our leaders.
And now?
Its answer...
And now? Today? Now?
There is no way the South African racist government can negotiate any type of freedom with men behind bars. Only free men can negotiate, which is what Mandela said in his statement when he was replying to the state president's offer.
What kind of a statement would the state president have to make? What would he have to say that would enable your husband, without loss of face, without having wasted the last 23 years of his life in prison, what would allow him and his colleagues to say, all right, let's talk?
In the first place, Mandela never went to prison for his own freedom. From the very onset, they spoke at cross purposes. The state president was talking in terms of Mandela's freedom. Mandela is in prison for the freedom of his people, not for himself.
You used a great many eloquent words, but what you're saying is really one word: impasse.
Precisely, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid so, unless the government releases the leaders unconditionally, it dismantles apartheid, there is no way they can negotiate with anyone else.
Mrs. Mandela, they say there are blacks in this country and black leaders in this country who will negotiate with them, who will deal with them, who represent a great many people. Chief Buthelezi is one of them.
We've never had any problems in the African National Congress about identifying who the black man's enemy in this country is. The fact that the government can find itself some leaders of its own is of no consequence whatsoever to us.
25 years from now, when your children are your age, my children are my age, where will this land be?
I'm afraid only the Botha regime can answer that. I'm afraid it's only the Botha regime that will bring about peace. I'm afraid one can only visualize very tragic times ahead of us if the government is not prepared to dismantle apartheid. If the government still thinks the black man is going to wait by the side, wait for the white master to dismantle apartheid at his own pace, as much as the Afrikaner is prepared to fight to the last drop of blood, so does the black man today, to fight to the last drop of blood for his honor, for his liberation, for his pride.